On my channel, I've detailed much about what confusion a lot of this current generation faces going into this technological world they may not understand, despite everything being thrown at them. You'd think they have all the answers in the world, but perhaps they need to ask more questions to find out more about the world, but even more about themselves. And it's hard to know about themselves when they are being thrown all these identities and different attachments and material things and people and events and this and that, when do they ever take the time to step back and really evaluate themselves? This is why people find such great value in things like meditation, for instance, or yoga or Tai Chi or any sort of practice that allows the individual to internally look upon themselves. But another strategy is simply a video like this. Videos have been used throughout the world to help waken up people's minds to events that are going on, false flags, oh my gosh, I was lied to, this or that, or oh, I learned something new. It's like a university of knowledge online. You don't need to take a course. You don't need to spend money. You can just Google or YouTube search or DuckDuckGo, or there's tons of different websites. You can almost do anything if you put your mind and imagination to it. And that's what I did when I was about 11 or 13. I started researching, I started thinking, I was finding knowledge that other people did not have. And that gave me an advantage. But it also made me get judged by many adults who claimed, well, you're too young to talk about this or know about this, and what do you know? You haven't experienced it. Do they realize it's a different time and day? Yet, those same people often don't know how to even work technology, have not even done enough Google searches themselves. Now, this video is not an attack on the adult population, for heck, I am an adult at this point. The point is understanding that adults need to listen to the youth and realize that the times are always changing. This might sound redundant, as many different truths in this world sound redundant, because they're worth emphasizing to recognize and to remind people of who they are so they don't lose their sense of being. So that way, what does and what is supposed to get passed down from generation to generation is what allows people to live on, continue living on, because you right now living as you are is a result of many different ancestors and past that brought you to where you are now. And you have to give that great respect as a youth. But just as much as the youth may not give credence to the adults or them before them, the adults don't give much credence to the youth, so really do they have an example to follow? Because oftentimes in our youth, they learn by example. But the youth has a lot more than just learning by example. In fact, they have talents that the adults may not even see. And you can see this if you play with kids and you actually open your heart and mind to learn from them as an adult. Because you can. They have a creativity that you as an adult will be like, wow, they're noticing some things that I'm not noticing. They have an imagination to see things that otherwise I would not see. They're able to have fun in ways that I can't have fun. This is the value of a child, and a child has such great value in this creativity until they become adulterated into an adult, where they have to become part of this consumerist, materialist mindset. Now, people may assume that kids are like consumers who are always just taking from whatever the parents give them or whatever the institutions give them, but that does not have to be the child. In fact, the child could be a rebel and say, no, I want to do my own thing, I want to find my own way. The child is a blank slate coming into this world. That is actually more powerful than the adult who's been conditioned all over their life, where they can't even have an open mind to change their ways or realize what ways they've been in. And so they lack the creativity, they lack the imagination, they lack the fun. And then the adult says, well, you got to enjoy your youth. But at the same time, the adult says, well, you got to make sure you go to college, you got to make sure you do this, you have to know this and do that. And they're imposing their will on the child. So while they encourage and like the blank slate, they encourage and like the opposite. How contradictory adults are in relationship to the youth, although these two have to work together just as much as the masculine and the feminine, right? All these forces in the world have to work together, and people just have to find out where it belongs. Same thing with wrongdoing. It's like, oh, Corey, what are you saying? Wrongdoing is right? Well, wrongdoing exists because that's how you know what is right. Everything, the yin-yang balance of the world teaches us, and everything, and oftentimes we learn the most from the cycles of birth and death. Somebody dies, oh my gosh, I realize I have to take control of my life. Oh, we have a new baby, wow, I start seeing things for what they are. People I talk to, they tend to learn the most from these very fragile, important moments in life. And let's not forget that, right? Let's not forget that. We can grow older in ignorance until something big happens in our life. Why do we have to learn from that big thing happening? Could we not have prevented the problem? We have to consider these questions. The youth could be more receptive than the adults. They could be wanting to learn more, and because knowledge is the only good and ignorance is the only evil, as Socrates, the Western father of philosophy, said, that makes kids more in the line of good, unless, of course, they are tempted by the bad, which is the ignorant that wants to impose their will on the good, on the people who are open, who want to learn. And you have to question if adults are really willing to learn or want to continue to learn, because the kids are studying, they're researching, and the adults are like, I'm retired, I'm doing my thing, I'm in my job, I got what I need, or I want this material thing. They're not ever saying, well, I need to keep learning, I need to keep educating. Oh, what do I pass down for the next generation? These are things that the adults don't consider, right? And I'm cutting so much because I have all these other distractions going on, because this is the current day and age. But really, the amount of phone notifications I just got in the past 5 minutes, and then having to respond to everything, it's like, do I have to? Do I need to keep this organ, this body part with me? I mean, we have these obligations we create for ourselves that we never had before. You have to question and say, well, should people be doing manual hard labor like they've been doing for thousands of years? Should people be slaves to anybody like they've been doing for thousands of years, just because it's been done for so long? Just because it's been so ingrained in the human heart? I mean, these are things that we have to question. And I'm not saying for adults to just abandon all their ideals and just go completely with the current norm, because that can absolutely be detrimental. But realize that while they want to share their own ideals, they have to do so in a fashion that is basically complementary, asking questions. I mean, asking questions is the best way to get an individual thinking about their own life in a way that is also non-invasive. And it's honesty too. And people should not be dishonest. I wrote a whole book about this. And if you are honest and you have concerns about this generation, you should share it. But learn how to share it. Don't complain about it. I see there's a lot of adults who want to complain. I have certainly a lot of complaints I can have. But is it really a complaint if I don't blame some people for wanting to be ignorant or wanting to do certain things because of their environments and how they grew up? I need to be sympathetic to that point to realize why people do what they do, why people are who they are. And this is the key to true tolerance or true compassion, to having a voluntary free world where everybody sort of gets along, because you don't need violence. You don't need violence to make people get things your way in certain ways and say things must be that way. I mean, it's impractical, it's utopian, it's foolish. And believing that certain pieces of paper or human beings have authority and have this imagined right to rule, I mean, that is the fantasy. But people want to say I'm in a fantasy for thinking some new ideas. These ideas are not even that new. They were shared in the 1800s. They were shared in the 1900s. It's not a problem of this generation. I'm simply trying to look at humanity's evolution. I'm not like my generation. I'm not like the older generation either, although I tend to get along with the older generation more than the younger generation, because the younger generation wants to be consumed on the smartphone and stuff like that. But then the younger generation, they're open, they're learning. They're not exposed to the smartphones if the parents actually care. So the parents, it's like every time you look on the TV and something happens and you see something on the news, you have to ask yourself, where is the parent? What is the parent doing? Do they care about their child? Right? But people may not ask that question. The same way people may not say, well, was this person on drugs? Were they doing something, pharmacology-wise? What was affecting this person's mindset? But no, it's the person, it's their race, it's that, it's this, and it's just ignorance, it's assumption. But it's not looking at the deeper underlying scenarios. You always have to consider all the other environments. Anytime someone's in a relationship, the same thing. Look at the other environments. Be able to take your time, take your step back. But people have a hard time doing that in today's day and age, and it's affecting the adults just as much as the youth. So don't make the exception. Don't say that the youth is the problem. Realize where the problems are also among the adults. And that's why we have to be aware, because the adults can be more demanding and imposing, and the children can be more fun and more receptive. Those both have problems, and they both have good solutions that can actually be used. So you just have to see where and when that can be applied. Okay, you could also look at it as left brain versus right brain, masculine versus feminine, and sort of those influences as well, right? So you see there's this cycle of every generation of, well, we want to do something better than the previous generation. You see there's parents who are like, man, I don't like the way my parents raised me, so I'm going to raise my kids differently. And then the kids are like, well, I don't like the way my parents raised me, I'm going to raise my kids this way. And things generally will improve as long as people continue that cycle. But that means you have to realize you can't go against the cycle and say, oh, this generation, that, because things are going to continually move in that direction. And you have to be able to go with it to an extent, not to go with it 100%. The key is to look for contradictions. Like I said, when an adult claims that you should enjoy your youth at the same time claiming you have to go to college and go to school, because that can basically ruin a kid's whole life when they go to school and destroy their creativity and become indoctrinated into the system and become more like the adult, and then they don't fit in with the rest of their generation, or they never really enjoyed their youth and they feel alienated from their true purpose or who they are. And you can see some of these patterns all throughout many different generations, but other patterns are new because of technology and innovation that has never been seen before in history. So being able to see all these dichotomies and different polarities is what may you say is intelligence, but it's not an easy thing to summarize in a video. Nonetheless, that's why my main message is to simply open your mind and ask questions. And so if you want to change the youth or change the adults, the key is asking questions and having an open mind. And if somebody doesn't want to listen to your questions, you ought to question that very relationship. Why can't someone just be open? Have a relationship of a question. Have a mere conversation that is done out of good heart. Choose people who are supportive for you, whether you're an adult or a youth. Oftentimes people who are, considered senior citizens who are in retirement homes, like that's a thing, they look toward the youth because it helps invigorate their soul, saying, wow, look at this youth, look at this new generation. And that should happen, not being secluded in their retirement home, only surrounded by people like them, right? And same thing with the youth. The youth should look up to the adults like, wow, look at all this wisdom they have, rather than being like, oh, look at these adults trying to impose their will on me, trying to control me, doing this and doing that. This should not be the case, guys. There should be a harmony found. And I think people need to evaluate that for themselves. I could come up with a list and say, well, what about this and what about this? Are you doing this in your life? But you need to look at your own environment and your own season and with your own people and see, I'm down south. The people up north in America, they're not the same as down here. People have a different pace of life, a different lifestyle. You have to be able to have an open mind to see that difference. And there's nothing wrong with that difference. You just need to understand it. Knowledge is the only good. Ignorance is the only evil. So adulteration is so much so as denaturing, because you are taking what was there provided by nature and turning it more into what was man, unless you work with nature, work with what was provided. You say, hey, I have birthrights. I was born creative. I'm going to nurture that. I'm going to strengthen that. That is real guidance. That is real teaching. That is a coach. That is the role of philosophy. That's the role of evolution, is to evolve given the present, given the current state of how things are. You don't go against your past. You move with your past toward the future with the present. Thank you very much for watching.